This episode brought to you by Nicholson Realty 2.0, the Gas City Performing Arts Center, Chuck Sewer, Drain and Plumbing.
Welcome to Garage Talk. I'm Conrad. Let's go.
I'm Ted. It's time to rock and roll. Special guest today.
Yes, we're sitting down with Chris Parker, a candidate for Indiana Senate District 17, a district that's becoming ground zero for some of the biggest debates happening in Grant County, Huntington, Wabash, parts of Whitley counties. From economic development to property taxes, this seat isn't just political. It's personal for a lot of families trying to understand where their money's going, Teddy.
Oh, yeah.
And what their future look like. We're diving into real issues people are talking about at the dinner tables and in those entertaining Facebook comment sections, you know.
Or around the coffee machine at work.
That's right. That's right.
It's everywhere.
TIF districts, how they impact school funding, Senate Bill 1 legislation, and what it actually means for the taxpayer. And, of course, the growing controversy around data centers, Teddy.
A couple years ago, it was solar farms. Now we're...
Yep. And now here we are. Everybody, welcome Chris Parker.
Thanks for having me. My name's Chris Parker, and I'm a candidate for Indiana Senate District 17. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you for coming.
Share a little bit about yourself, Chris, if you would, real
Sure.
quick.
I came to Huntington University up in Huntington, Indiana, back in the mid-'90s. Attended the school for a youth ministry degree. I met my wife, who has a pretty well-connected local family, and I've been in Huntington for the last 30 years.
Wow.
So served at a couple churches as a youth pastor and found that real estate pays a little better. So I've stayed involved in youth ministry as a volunteer opportunity and enjoy being connected with my church and serving and providing for my family through real estate.
Children?
Yep, I've got boys that are 20 and 23, and then we have a tag-along daughter who's 9. So
Wow.
at 40 years old, we thought we were done, and we weren't quite finished yet. So
Same thing happened to me.
yeah, it's the boys enjoy saying that they were the favorites, but I said, well, we got it right on the third try.
All right, good. Well, that's good to know. All right, let's just jump right into some questions we're going to throw at you.
Sure.
Explain TIF to me as I'm a 10-year-old. TIF, T-I-F.
A TIF.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's going to be certain tax districts that are established in certain areas to be able to benefit a budget that was pre-spent many times. You know, there's some infrastructure development that could be for a variety of reasons, and then the folks that are benefiting from that development are going to pay a little extra in taxes to be able to reimburse that fund. So we've seen that, like Jefferson Point up in Fort Wayne. They spent a lot of money getting that together, and so all of those shops pay a little extra money to put back into the redevelopment.
Okay.
So we see that in different areas for different reasons.
Why doesn't that money go to school systems?
Budgets are set up with some pretty good guardrails to make sure that things are allocated correctly. And so with the school systems, it was that county taxes went straight towards the schools, and then the state decided they were going to take that over, and they made different budgets within the school budgets for school buses, transportation, debt service. I forget the fourth one is, but they have, things are all compartmentalized with the budgets. And so the TIF districts aren't designed to go to with that money to go to the schools. They have different allocations. Of course, the politicians get into it.
Right.
It's like a bowl of spaghetti, and sometimes where things start isn't where it ends up. But there's different taxes for different tax purposes. And the TIF district is not designed to benefit the schools.
Okay.
10-year-old Conrad understood it as that TIF money goes back to that TIF district itself and funds like the roads, if the roads in that TIF district need repaved. I think that's where.
Yeah, a lot of that. Your basic infrastructure, but so no one thinks schools should get a share of that as a reimbursement, or like you said, you're letting the county and the state
Yeah, and
do what they
education's an
do.
interesting thing. I'm not sure that anybody's really excited about where things are at when it comes to school funding and the corresponding taxes. Half of the state's budget is on education.
Right.
So that's a lot of money.
It is.
I think there's a lot of great ideas on how that could be structured differently. I'm not sure that that's anything that I'm going to arrive down in Indianapolis and make a huge dent on. Sometimes, lack of awareness on how we got to where we're at. It would certainly help to have a little bit more of the history. It doesn't make the waters any clearer while we're here, but there might be a better way to explain to folks why things are the way they are. It's kind of like eliminating property taxes, as Florida's working to do that. Like, okay, well that changes a lot of things for us if we were to eliminate property taxes and go to a sales tax. So,
Right.
it sounds like a great idea on paper, but trying to unravel
Yeah.
that ball of yarn gets to be as easy as taking Christmas lights out of the garbage bag at Christmas, and they're a pretty tangled mess.
Right. And I'm learning more and more the older I get, and I don't know. It's
When you get it figured out, let me know.
it's a struggle. But who holds them accountable for the disbursement of this?
I don't have the clean answer for that. I know that there's a lot of checks and balances, and there's a lot of opportunities for citizens to be able to ask budgetary questions. And I don't know that I have the answer on who you would speak to. And I don't know, were you asking about the TIF distribution or school budgets?
The TIF, yeah.
Yeah, I would start by going down and talking to the folks at the courthouse.
Okay.
You might get bounced around to a couple offices, but
That's
they're all there to
that's
help.
what I'm
They're
saying.
all there to try to get your answers. And, I don't know that anybody's trying to hide behind a cloak of secrecy. I think that especially when it comes to state funds, county funds, that everybody plays their cards face up.
Yeah, you got to go through that chain of command, but some of us like to skip a rung
Yep.
or two.
And
or
every once in a
five.
while, you might have to file a FOIA, but I think for the most part, when it comes to expenses and money, everybody's pretty transparent on that.
Yeah, schools only receive a base value of that. Let's get into Senate Bill 1, shall we?
Sure.
And what is Senate Bill 1? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I would say that I've asked the question, could somebody please bring me up to speed on what's going to happen with the new tax structure? And what I was told was the veterans of 45, 50 years have no idea what the implications are. I was talking with somebody this morning who's involved with veterans, and he said he got a little brochure style handout and said, hey, these are the changes that are going to be coming, and sometime by the early part of summer, he'd have somebody come down and train him on what the implications are. And so I know that it was pretty broad, and I've asked for clarification that way I could make sure that I was able to explain it with some level of competence, and I was told it wasn't worth a try yet. We're still trying to figure out the implications. So it wasn't a pass it so that way we can find out what's in it. But when it comes to the application, the implications, I think we're still noodling through some of that. It's still pretty fresh. So I would say that there's people that are a lot more experienced and had a lot more input that would be able to speak to that. I'd say I'm the new guy.
You kind of explained Senate Bill 1. These so-called experts, did they expect the school losses that we're going through now? Not just the schools, but we're losing staff. They're going to cut transportation. What did they think when they were doing this?
I don't have an answer to what they're thinking.
It would be speculation, but
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
give it a shot, man, if you want.
I think that the state, like everybody else, is facing an increased amount of cost, trying to figure out where revenue's coming from. We see, we have the 5th highest gas tax, depending on how you calculate gas tax in the state. They're adding a consumption tax into the conversation. They're trying to advance conversation about turning I-70 into a toll road. So if you want to go to the Indianapolis airport, you'd need to pay to get there. They've talked about turning some of our other interstates into toll roads. So I think just like at a personal level, we're all facing increased expenses from property taxes to health care and gas prices. We're all feeling that. The same is true with the state.
Yeah.
Their gas costs more than it did 5-10 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Their health care costs, their cement prices to fix our roads, everything costs more. So, they don't have corresponding revenue to keep up with that, same as our households.
True.
So I think The numbers are significantly different, but I think the challenges for the state are the same as what we have for families. And so they're trying to restructure revenue collection, try to do that in a fair and balanced way to be able to not overburden the population, try to balance between businesses and residents, what's a fair portion to pay, and make sure that they're keeping up with standards in the community from roads to education.
Right, and that's probably like a lot of people don't look at it that way. They're just looking at how's it impact me.
Of course.
Like you said, it's not impact. They're not thinking that it's impacting the state and everybody else there because, because the schools rely on the property taxes or transportation facilities, operations, all that stuff. We know that. And like we mentioned, there's staff cuts coming up, program cuts. It's just.
I had a farmer talk to me the other day, and he said, "Hey, if you get in, I'd like you to do something about my taxes. They've gone up $50,000 since before COVID. Mm-hmm. I pay a lot in taxes." Okay. I said, "Well, we got to figure out that your property value's doubled from 10 years ago, so your taxes have doubled from 10 years ago.
Yep.
But let's be honest, when it comes to the farmers, their assessments are a little different than what we have residentially. So farm ground selling 15, 25 grand an acre, depending on where you're at, how many trees and drainage and soil types and everything else. But yet their basis is down at 2,000, 2,500. So, these farmers have a lot of acres and a lot of big bills, of course. But if we brought their basis up to fair market value, those $50,000 taxes would probably be $500,000 taxes. We live in an ag community. We've got to find balance to that. Mm-hmm. And so as you're asking about school costs and how do we make sure that we're not trimming the school budgets unnecessarily, everybody's trying to tighten their belt a little bit and make sure that there's enough going around. So how do we not hurt the farmers? How do we not hurt the schools? The farmers care about the schools and the schools need the farmers. We got to find that symbiotic relationship where the worlds match up instead of colliding.
Yeah, and you basically just answered it.
And we're probably in a situation where there's no right answer. I mean, the schools are probably going to be a little upset. The farmers are going to be a little upset. The regular residential home payers are going to be a little upset. And so when we've got to take money from somewhere, it could be, a food and beverage tax. It could be a little extra on the property tax. It could be a little bit extra on the gas tax. Yep. And no matter where it comes from, you're going to have pushback and folks are going to complain because we'd all love to have our taxes lower. Of course we would. Mm-hmm. And we'd also like to have all the potholes filled. And we'd love our teachers to be better paid. And we'd love for our policemen to get fair compensation. Mm-hmm. Go down the list, and we've got great ideas to spend everybody else's money. But, we just don't want to pay more ourselves.
Exactly.
Tough balance. Tough balance.
Money's got to come from somewhere.
And that's like, the simple line, property tax relief for homeowners equals less money for school corporations.
Well, and I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about veterans and capping or eliminating taxes on veterans. We look at our seniors and how they're on a fixed income. So if somebody's already 75 and their taxes have gone up because their assessment's gone up, how on a fixed income do they manage, and where's that money come from on their fixed budget? So what if we were to cap seniors at age 70 on their real estate taxes? That sounds like a great idea. Right. But then everybody who's under 70 is going to pay a little bit more of a burden to be able to benefit the aging population. So it's just one of those situations. I had somebody tell me early on, you can't make everybody happy, but without much effort, you can make everybody unhappy. I think when we talk about
that's true.
Whether it's a county budget or a state budget, I think nobody's leaving the room. The group is not leaving the room with everybody in agreement that it was a fair outcome. Somebody's going to feel like they got the raw end of the deal.
It's not a win-win situation.
Nope.
It's just
if there was a solution that was equitable for everybody, the politicians would have figured that out by now. The politician that can figure out something that's fair for everybody would get reelected time after time. But we're left with a perpetual frustration on feeling like we're paying too much and not getting enough for what we're putting into the system. So that's true for me. It's true for everybody.
Right. Now, do you think the school systems are falling behind because of these policies?
I was speaking with a superintendent who said every year the state legislature tries to add some new policies to the school systems and imposes new standards that they need to meet, but they never reduce any of the standards. Mm-hmm. So I think it's one of those situations where the teachers and the schools are continually trying to meet state standards, and the focus is kind of leaving education, and we kind of end up with some inferior products. And so we look at the number of folks that are sending their kids to Christian schools or homeschooling. Why is that? They don't have those same standards. And so the child is the focus, education is the focus. And it's really tricky. I would not want to be a teacher in the current academic culture. Just we look at the number of problems that teachers have to deal with. And many of them are outside of education, trying to keep the classroom together and trying to help the kids that are falling behind keep up. And sometimes the best and brightest get left behind because we're trying to help the back of the line. And it's a never-ending battle for the teachers. And so when the state legislature shows up and says, hey, we have a couple great ideas for you, usually that's not helpful for the teachers in the classroom.
Well, that's true. And Conrad and I both will tell everybody that teachers are heroes. I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I don't know, I'm a home rule guy, so I just believe that sometimes state and federal just needs to kind of get out of the way and let the teachers who are right there know best.
yeah.
If you have a guy who's on an accident scene as a EMS guy, like, do you want him worried about liability and everything else, or saving your kid who's in a
Right.
car accident?
Yeah.
Like, forget all the rules, do whatever you need to do to save my kid. Well, in the classroom, we could probably shelve some of the rules and try to focus on the kids. And sometimes the rules that come benefit some school districts, but set other school districts behind because they're over encumbered with those things. So it's just like the doctor. It's not a one size fits all solution when it comes to legislative ideas or state budget regulations on, some schools might need more buses but they've set up these silos within the budgets on how you can spend certain monies.
Right.
So this bill is going to impact the public schools. It's projected that $750 million in property tax revenue over the first 3 years. And they call this the 2028 cliff. In 2028, the revenue loss is approximately $336 million. That is an impact on operations. Can't even imagine having, how many public schools that's going to affect. Transportation, facilities, maintenance, HVAC and roofs, utilities and insurance. It's gonna get interesting for certain, and we're looking at the funding. 46% of Indiana state budget is K-12 funding.
I have a little smirk on my face, not because of the stats that you're throwing out. They're serious stats. But I thought, it's kind of like at the federal level, one party will do things and they implement their idea, and the execution comes on the subsequent party's term.
Yeah.
And then it works both ways. So I had nothing to do with Senate Bill 1, but here I am being asked to defend that or answer questions on that.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, the execution is going to come in 2028, and guess who's going to get the phone calls? It'll be me, even though I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Here I am needing to defend that either my predecessor or the party weighed in on, and I had no input on, yet I'll be at the other end of that phone call representing Senate District 17. So a little bit of a precarious position. It'd be different. I could come back to constituents and say, well, actually I advocated for, XYZ, and that was rejected, but I was trying to represent our community well. I wasn't there for representation, so I'll be there for the back end of it, and I'll probably get some nasty phone calls in a couple of years, but it's going to impact all of us. And I think, we have the same thing. If you read Farmer's Almanac and you go, oh, it's a hard winter coming, we better get ready. I mean, there we were during COVID trying to save up on toilet paper, and maybe my wife and I could go through 2 different checkout lines. That would get 2 rolls of toilet paper instead of 1. If they said that round 2 of COVID was coming, you go, I'm going to stock up on some toilet paper. That way we don't end up in a situation where we run out.
Right.
Well, when we look at Senate Bill 1 and saying things are coming, and there are going to be some pretty drastic changes that are really going to impact counties and families, well, let's start tightening up the belt now, because if we wait till 2028, we could be in a tricky spot. So I would love to be in a position where I could better advise residents or communities on how to prepare for that. But I think, like most of all of us, we're still trying to figure out what's really in the pipeline. We know that there's changes.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly where the rubber meets the road on some of those changes.
Teddy?
Okay, so what's this mean for the schools?
I don't know.
It's all
Just,
I don't know.
and that's, what, do you have any ideas what we should fix first?
I don't. I would tell you this. This is an interesting race for me. I fought solar in Huntington County for the last couple of years. I was working alongside a couple people to really try to make a difference and protect our community, protect our farmland, protect our natural resources. And the guy who was running before me, I was championing his race. And when he found out that he wasn't going to be able to continue because his employer would not be supportive of being gone for 2 and 3 months a year for legislative session, he had to drop out. He's the breadwinner in the family and had to back out. So he backed out on a Monday in February. The team that I was a part of, I'm kind of the grassroots guy trying to help with some local stuff, started calling me on Tuesday afternoon, asked me if I'd run. It was Wednesday morning that I was headed down to Indy to file, because we had to file Wednesday for the caucus. That was the subsequent Saturday. So it was only in February of this year that I decided that I would go ahead and run for Senate District 17.
Okay.
So that put me significantly behind other candidates who've had an opportunity to get educated on all of the issues,
Right.
establish a fundraising network, establish a political network, establish a volunteer network. I've been playing catch up since February.
I'm
So
sure.
would you love to have a representative that's more educated on the issues? Probably. But I think that most legislators are still trying to figure out what the impact is. They know they're trying to do right by passing Senate Bill 1. There's nobody that's running that's against education. So everybody's
right.
pro-education. Everybody's for solidifying, the core and the fabric of our community. I don't think that you're going to have any candidates across the state that are saying we need to trim school funding.
Right.
The question is, how do we do that best? And that's going to vary by personality, vary by community, because what works in the southern end of the state doesn't work in the northern end of the state. What works in the rural community doesn't work in the urban community. And the state often has to fire a silver bullet and decide what's best for everybody, and that's usually not best for everybody.
That's true.
So we're going to switch gears here and go into a segment about data centers and the controversy, because I've been in and out of circles listening and trying to absorb as much knowledge about this as I can. And there's breadcrumbs, and there's still, do we know? Is this something that is coming down the pipeline? And all those questions are up in the air. So here's our question for you. Do you support or do you oppose data centers locally?
I would say I presently oppose data centers. I recognize that there's a need for computing. I know that the United States is trying to race China to be at the forefront of that technology. I recognize that there's some benefits to AI. I recognize I've coached my own boys at 20 and 23 to try to get into an industry that's not going to be overtaken by AI. I'm a realtor. There's ways that I could conceive that realtors would be eliminated and just kind of relegated to being door openers. So I think that AI is going to revolutionize every industry. I recognize that many of my peers are using AI and trying to advantage themselves, whether that's on budgets or marketing, contract negotiation, trying to suss out different liabilities that might be in different contracts. It's really interesting to see how AI is challenging different industries. So I recognize that there's a technological benefit. I also recognize that this is new. We had that with solar when it came to Huntington. I said, I'm apprehensive of solar. What's the first thing I wanted to do was to go out and see a solar farm. I've not yet been to a data center, and I don't know that very many of our local officials have been to data centers, but they're making decisions on data centers. I was at a commissioners meeting here in Grant County, and the question was, if the data center went bankrupt, belly up, what else could the building be used for? A lot of the conversation had to do with the security fencing and green screening around it, and very little conversation about the building and what the natural resources are that would be used. No conversations about, the aquifer, the impact, no knowledge on whether that water that would be pulled out of the aquifer would be discharged at the surface level or injected back into the aquifer. There's conversations about AI data centers that are air-cooled. No knowledge about what that would be. So it's really difficult to be supportive of something that we don't have much knowledge on. I know that there's a number of conversations that are happening behind the scenes, behind non-disclosure agreements. And so I think as the community is eager to figure out what the impact is, certainly there's some economic benefit, but there's also some community liability when it comes to our water supplies, looking at how electrical rates would be impacted. I don't know. How do we know unless it's in front of us? I think that's where the listening sessions were going to be very important.
Yeah.
And there was conversation that those listening sessions were designed to hear from the community. The question very quickly was, what are you wanting feedback on? You haven't told us information for us to give you community support or apprehension. So how do we're kind of in an abyss, and the conversation is you go first. No, you go first. Well, we need our leaders who are enthusiastic, who are talking with developers and trying to kind of line things up to see if that would be a good fit for our community, to let us know what's going on. And the folks that I've talked to have felt like they've been left in the dark. And there's a little disenfranchisement with some of that community leadership. And it might just be that the conversation's premature, but the community definitely feels like that conversation is relevant for today.
My inner conspiracy theorist always gets a hold of me, Teddy. Teddy knows. Economic benefit and the balance between community impact. I've went down a rabbit hole of, finding how much the infrastructure strain is on the community, tax incentives going full circle back to the TIF tie-in. I'm sure there's tax abatements and other things. But what I am most concerned of is what protections should exist if they do come into our communities, because technology is advancing every day, every single day. What happens when this building and whatever's inside it is obsolete and they decide, well, it's cheaper for us to go somewhere else and build? And now they vacate and abandon a huge eyesore that used to be on prime farm ground.
I think it's easy to be Chicken Little and say that the sky is falling.
Yeah.
I think that negativity and fear drives a lot of headlines. I mean, we see that with the news stations, newspapers, back when we had newspapers.
Yeah.
It's
What's
fear.
that?
Fear sells, right? So I think it's easy to say things that perpetuate fear. I want to be careful with that. But like you, I've kind of gone down the rabbit holes, and it only spurs on my apprehension. I feel like I've done enough research on it that I don't think there's anything else happening based on my Facebook news feed. It's only data centers. That's all I get. That and some of the other, weird things that are happening in our communities. We see that there's a national push. It's not just Indiana. We're not the leader on data centers. We look at Texas, North Carolina, that are really concerned about the economic impacts and wondering if the adverse environmental impacts are worth the economic benefit. Yeah. And so there's a huge push for moratoriums across many communities nationwide, a lot of apprehension. And it's concerning that we're greenlighting projects that we really don't know the impact on. We see that Ohio is working to lower their wastewater discharge standards to be able to allow data centers to be compliant. Why would we lower our wastewater standards? We recognize that those chemicals that are injected into the water to make sure that the coolant lines don't corrode and plug up and everything, that we don't have the media at wastewater treatment plants to be able to filter that out. So if we lower the discharge standards, then there's not a concern. Why would we do that for big tech when we wouldn't do it for ourselves? I guess that's part of my concern. In listening to the Exit 255 talk, the guy who was there presenting to us told us on night one when we were over at the Performing Arts Center, trying to listen and understand, the community showed up, farmers were there, the folks that were directly being impacted by this were present to try to get information. And we were told very clearly by the presenter that a data center was not feasible for Exit 255. There was no infrastructure, there was no opportunity for a data center to be at Exit 255. However, if you read the feasibility study, all it does is talk about data centers. And so it seemed exceptionally disingenuous to the folks that were attending that there wasn't going to be a data center when very clearly that's the focus of the conversation. And then, spurring on that apprehension, feeding the fear, is that listening sessions 3, 4, and 5 were canceled. So, there's a lot of that speculation on what's really happening behind the scenes. Well, if the community of Grant County decides they're going to do a moratorium on data centers, why not just have Gas City exit it? And then we bypass the moratorium because now we're under Gas City ordinances. Hang on. So there's that concern from the community. When we look at data centers, though, one of my concerns is that it's not Amazon that would be developing the data center. If they're green and they're good for the community, why isn't it just simply an Amazon data center? Why is it federal subsidies going to a foreign corporation, some Italian corporation, that's going to be putting in the data center? If there's an issue with contaminated well water or wells are running dry, who does Grant County pursue? Do you pursue the landlord or the tenant? Who do you go after?
If you're renting, you're going after the landlord.
You go after the landlord. Because if you go to Amazon, what is Amazon's defense? Hey, we're just a tenant here. We're just running our data through. We don't have anything to do with it. Well, okay, so now we have to go after the Italian corporation because our wells are dry or the water's contaminated. So, okay, going after the Italian corporation. So, you get a couple $1 million together to sue the Italians? No, it's probably going to be, I don't know, I'm making up a number, 25 million, and you'd probably need the federal government approval to take them to international court. Well, let's say that you get the money together, you get them to international court. What do the Italians say? Hey, we financed this project, but we did it according to your standards. We hired an American feasibility study company. We did an American development company. An environmental company was the Americans. We had an American company drill the wells. Well, who do you think's drilling a new well field? Is it a guy out of Grant County? No. It's probably ABC Well Company, and they're probably out of Oklahoma or Texas, who knows. And what happens after they get paid? They're going to close their company because they know there's liability there, and they sell their assets, they go back bankrupt, they close down, and now it's XYZ Drilling. But you can't sue ABC Wells because their corporation is gone. And you can't sue the Italians because they did everything with the Americans. So now we're in a spot where everybody's around pointing at each other here in the community. You should have. And the folks that did this are gone. And they hide it behind corporate law, LLCs. They hide it through international law. That case law with corporations is that corporations have a responsibility to their shareholders, the investors. And their job is to take all of the profit and minimize all the liability. So their accountability is not to the customer or to the citizen. Their accountability is to the investor. So this is all set up that if it were to fail, we're now left with each other. And we probably need to go to a state fund. And who pays the state fund if our wells go dry? Who would fund that? We would.
Taxpayers, yeah, of course.
So we turn around and we look and we go, okay, well, we abated their taxes for 10 years. So who's picking up that tax load in that interim time? Who's paying that? We are. And the state has it set up that they don't have to pay sales tax on any of their equipment that goes into the data center. That's billions of dollars. So who picks up that tax load? We do. And they either have reduced or waived electrical tax. So who pays for that? We do. And now they have INM, AEP petitioning the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission for a rate increase to be able to connect solar and data centers to the electrical grid because they have to have that infrastructure cost. Go back to Exit 255. They couldn't just drop a data center in. They need to totally rebuild that system to be able to accommodate a data center. So the electrical provider pays for it, but they're going to the IURC for a rate increase. Who pays for the rate increase? We do. So if that data center uses the electricity of 1.7 million homes, and rough numbers are there's about 40 data centers coming to Indiana, you need 20 nuclear power plants to power all those data centers. There's no nuclear power plants coming. So I look at it and I say, there's a little bit of revenue for the community, no doubt. In our communities, as we talked before about Senate Bill 1, communities are already pressed on budgets. So would a few $1 million of relief be helpful annually? Of course it would. But that cheese is sitting in a mousetrap. And when we say, okay, what about our water? Is our water going to be in better shape or worse shape in 10 years? Our electrical bills, when we talk about, our community citizens paying, who's going to pay? We are paying. Every time there's an opportunity for Amazon or Meta to pay their fair share, the fiscal responsibility is shifted off of big tech and put on us. And our communities are already strained. When you talk about schools, when you talk about roads, counties, cities, state budgets, it feels like we're hemorrhaging cash. Mm-hmm. And we know our checks, we're not cash cows, but we're expected to pay a greater and greater share. But Meta and Amazon are getting off the hook. Why? Because there's a little bit of cheese in the mousetrap. And that could be big cheese. Several $1 million a year for a municipality is big money.
Oh, yeah.
But when they're taking $100 million out for every couple million they leave us, I don't think that leaves us stronger. And my big apprehension, and I'd love for somebody to overcome the objections and say the water's going to be cleaner, electricity bills are going to be lower. My big apprehension is that these data centers could very well be the brownfields of tomorrow. And we already struggle with that in Grant County, Huntington County, Fort Wayne. We've already got places where industry came, provided an economic benefit, and then left us maybe a little backwards. And it felt like it worked out really good at the time. But then in retrospect, we go, you know what? If we would have had, in hindsight, if we had better foresight, we probably would have done it a little differently. I just feel like with data centers that moratoriums might be the right thing for us to be able to better investigate. Get a charter bus. Let's send our community leaders out. Not a charter bus that's hosted by the big data centers,
right.
but that gets an honest tour. When we went to Mammoth Solar to take a look at the Mammoth Solar and see what a solar field really looked like, we didn't talk to the developers. We talked to the residents. We knocked on doors. What was construction like? What's the impact now that solar's across the street from you? Let's go talk to some of the folks that live next to a data center. Let's figure out what their well water's like. It's pretty interesting when I watch the videos on the internet, and I recognize those are fear-based videos. They get a lot of clicks when somebody's pouring muddy water out of their kitchen sink, and they go, this is all because of the data center. It's very sensational. But let's figure out, is that pervasive, or is that a one-off situation? When we talk about water being contaminated, when we talk about electrical rates and everything else, let's talk to people where this has already been installed. And let's figure out if that's good for the community. And that way we can reflect on our community and figure out if we really want to roll out the red carpet for that, or if we should have strong apprehension.
And that's where I believe state and local
Yep.
need to come together and give some protective, some protective policies in place. If that comes down the road, and who knows if it's happening next year or in 5 years, but I think that being proactive is always being better than reactive.
Well, knowledge is power, right?
Yes.
So the more we know, the better off we are.
Yeah.
Recognizing that as a baseline for the conversation, it's concerning to me that whenever I ask questions, I'm told that there's non-disclosure agreements, communication opportunities, meetings have been canceled where the public wanted to ask questions. That perpetuates my apprehension. Mm-hmm. I'm a home rule guy. I would love to have the communities have a stronger say in what's happening. And many times I see efforts to consolidate power at the state level or federal level. And I don't know that leaves the communities stronger. Senate District 17 represents Grant, Huntington, Wabash counties. Wabash is facing carbon sequestration. It doesn't matter to anybody in Grant County if they have a couple thousand PSI of carbon under their houses. That's their problem over in Wabash. Wabash doesn't care if Grant County puts in 2 or 3 data centers. That's your aquifer. I feel home rule should really apply, that the folks of the community in the county, the municipalities should have an opportunity to speak up and talk to their legislatures. It's not often that you can go to a federal representative or a state representative and voice your concern. And the higher up that authority is delegated to, the weaker your voice is. The more local that decision making is, the stronger your voice is. And I think that's why they canceled listening sessions 3, 4, and 5, because the community members had their voice heard, that apprehension was too strong. And that could have been for what they knew, it could have been for what they didn't know, but the community was not ready to say yes.
Chris, before we let you go, we always like to do a rapid fire. And these are just quick, off the top of your head answers. So, question 1, does government know better than its constituents?
Heck no.
Okay, that might have been a softball.
That takes,
toss.
yeah, that's a softball for sure. I think it was Ronald Reagan, I think, who said, I'm from the government, I'm here to help.
Nice. If you could redirect $1 from anywhere in the system straight into the schools, where are you taking that $1 from? It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like, I'm not a fan of the lottery. I feel like there's not very many people that are financially healthy and stable. I would love to see, we justify the lottery as being used for education. But who's usually the ones paying at the lottery? You know, who's buying the tickets?
Right.
It's usually
I'm
the
not
people.
very lucky at the scratch off.
Well, it's usually people that shouldn't be buying lottery tickets that are buying it. So I looked at some of the sin taxes and cigarettes and alcohol tax and lottery, and I think, it's hard to turn around and ask the people that are actually performing, I'll say the rich, to pay their fair share, because they already are when you look at their tax rates. But it's also hard to take a sin tax and look at the folks that are struggling to get by and live in check to check, to ask them to pay more too.
Alcohol consumption is down across America by like 33%.
It is.
All right. What are we on? Question 3. Be honest. What's more stressful for a school district right now? A, TIF, B, Senate Bill 1, or C, both?
Well, I'd probably say C, both. I feel like the only thing that really helps the schools is when the PTA shows up and says, hey, we've got coffee and sandwiches for you in the break room. I feel like most of the things that come from the state level to the teachers there's usually some apprehension and resistance to whatever's coming their way, because it's just more work on their plate.
All right. Last question.
Make it a good one.
And you got to pick a side.
Okay.
You got to pick a side. You get one sentence to convince a Gas City resident that a data center is either a good idea or bad idea. You get one sentence. Which side are you taking? Good idea or bad idea?
I'm going to take the bad idea. Let me formulate that sentence. Data centers are going to use electricity we don't have and water we can't waste. Let's choose wisely, because this impacts our future generations exceptionally significantly.
Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate you coming on.